All right, guys, welcome back to the Low Carb Consultant Podcast. So today we've got on Craig Emmerich. So an electrical engineer turned nutrition strategist, co-author of the book Keto, the Complete Guide, and the Carnivore Cookbook, and coach to countless clients navigating low carb, protein sparing, modified fasting, which we're going to talk about today, and carnivore lifestyles. Craig's method marries biochemistry, engineering precision, and real-world lived experience. He's tackled Lyme disease, chronic pain, and family nutrition head-on. So expect no-nonsense science, macro clarity, and deep insight. So again, Craig, great to have you on, man. Great to finally meet you. I'm glad we can make this happen.
Thank you, Max, for having me on. I'm happy to be here, and apparently Bella is too here. She's climbing in.
That's all good. Perfect. Great to have her with us as well. So Craig, maybe before we kind of get into all the fun stuff, can you give the listeners just a real brief background on yourself? And maybe, I know you and Maria, your wife, you guys have been doing this for, I think, nearly 20 years at this point.
Yeah.
Can you maybe give the listeners a brief background on how you even got here and how you switched from, the mechanical engineering side to this side with you and your wife?
Sure. Yeah. It's an interesting journey. It has been over 20 years. For Maria, I think she's been down this path and this lifestyle for like 25 years now, for herself. But for herself, it started out as something for her health. She had PCOS, she had acid reflux, IBS, this extra weight that she couldn't get rid of, even though she's following all the standard guidelines and running marathons and all this stuff. And she just started down the path to kind of figure out a way to fix herself, right? Mm-hmm. And she did. And then everybody wanted to know what she was doing because she was, losing this weight, even though she stopped running marathons and all this stuff was improving and her PCOS reversed and she got rid of all of her health issues. So she started helping people with, what she learned. And that's, 20 years ago. It took me, 5-6 years longer to come around because I didn't have health issues at the time. And so wasn't as pressing of a need. I ended up gaining, maybe 30 or losing like 30 pounds once I finally came over. But, I wasn't super worried about it at the time. Mm-hmm. And German background, German roots, I brewed my own beer and, it's hard to give up some of those old habits. And finally, sure. I just realized when I ate the food she made for me at work or wherever, I didn't have that afternoon slump and where I wanted to take a nap after lunch and, just had that better energy all day when I ate the stuff she made me. So I just decided I want to feel that way all the time. And I switched over, 15, 16 years ago now, to eating this way all the time. About, 3, 4, 5 years after that, we decided that her business was taking off enough. I was doing everything in the back, keeping the website working and, all the technical issues, all that stuff I was doing from the back end while I was still working as an engineer. So got pretty busy. And I just decided, you know what? You're growing enough that if we dedicate full time to your business, we can make this even bigger. And at that point, I took my engineering mindset of just learn, and then just applied it to biochemistry and just started learning everything I could about nutrition and biochemistry.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we see actually there's a lot of engineers that kind of go over into this space. Like I've had Ted Naiman on.
Ted's great.
Yeah, Ted's great. Interviewed the fittest doc, and he was an engineer turned doctor. And it's weird. And maybe this kind of leads into the question I had for you. Like, how do you think and maybe not just for you, but why do you think like your engineering background and other engineer backgrounds translate well to this, like transitioning over to this different type of lifestyle, like diet, low carb? Like, why do you think that works? And why do you think engineers find a lot of similarities, or not similarities, but like, why do you think they gravitate towards this approach?
Yeah, there's a ton of engineers in this space. It's interesting. Like Marty Kendall down in Australia, he's awesome. He's an engineer. Dave Feldman, the work
Dave
he's
Feldman,
been doing, he's a former engineer. Tyler Cartwright over with Keto Gains, he's a former engineer. There's a bunch of us in this space, and I think it's we're problem solvers. Like we look at systems and we figure out what's the problem and fix the root causes, of those problems, right? Like electrical engineer, if I had a computer chip and my outputs of that chip were wrong, first thing I'm going to do is go look at the inputs. Were the inputs right? And then if if they're not right, fix the inputs, and then the outputs hopefully should work if the chip's designed right. The human body's a lot the same, right? And today in healthcare, a lot of it isn't fixing problem; it's band-aids on the outputs, right? You got a bad output, you throw a prescription at it to mask the symptoms. You're not fixing the root cause. And engineers, I think, are really, root cause kind of people where we go back and look at fixing those root causes of, in our keto book over here, I started out a whole chapter called The Disease Tree. And it's just talking about the disease process, how this is tree and the root causes, the roots are, nutrition, obviously a big one, exercise or lack thereof. It's going to be a negative input, smoking, how much sunlight you get, how much sleep you get. These are all inputs to the body.
Yeah.
And if these inputs get off, the outputs, the leaves can get bad, get failed. And those outputs were, insulin resistance, cancer, Alzheimer's, all these problems that can result, that if you go back to the root causes, a lot of times those things can be reversed or fixed.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense too, right? Because just touching on inputs and outputs, right? And if you think about like your inputs, like, okay, and I think we're going to talk about this today because I've seen you on a handful of different podcasts talk about, people in some circumstances. We can talk about like lipotoxicity. We'll get to all that stuff and people gaining weight on keto and carnivore. But like I think one very simple way to look at it is like, okay, if your energy input is much too high, right? The body is not, and the goal is, let's say, to just lose weight. The body's not necessarily going to have a reason to tap into stored body fat if, our energy, or let's say our fat is not like astronomical, but if it's too high, then why would the body want to tap into stored body fat and go off those reserves when it can just go off the energy that you're putting into the body? So it's like, you kind of got to be careful and not careful, but I would say also maybe aware of your energy inputs, and then also what your output is. What's your expenditure? Are you active? Are you not active? And you kind of have to find a diet, I would say, and an energy intake that's going to work with that basic type of activity level.
Exactly right. A lot of people in the carnivore space, they kind of, it's sort of like a one size fits all for everyone solution.
Yeah.
Everybody eat high fat carnivore. That's it. And everything will just be perfect. But humans are not a one size fits all in any way, shape, or form. And you know what? A lot of men in carnivore, or people that are maybe like 6 foot tall and have more lean mass and whatnot, that advice can work quite well for those people. Or not a big history of obesity in your past and those kind of things. And a lot of the people in this space, the influencers, fit those categories. They're a 6 foot tall man with a lot of muscle mass. Well, I personally couldn't eat what they eat without gaining weight because I'm not as much lean mass as them. I don't have as much muscle. I'm not as active. I can't eat what they eat. I've got to have my diet a little different. And it very much applies to, the middle-aged woman who has a history of obesity. Their diet is not going to work well if they follow that solution. They might see some initial results because guess what? You change from the standard American diet to anything whole food based, you're probably going to see some initial weight loss.
Sure.
You're going from basically the worst possible diet to, anything whole food based is going to be better. But then they'll probably plateau. But we've even seen, and I've got hundreds of testimonies from people that come to us from the eat all the butter and steak and, eat all the fatty meats space where they're just gaining weight. And one woman just recently, she's 130 pounds overweight. She gained 30 pounds. That's all. Following that advice, she gained 30 pounds and her insulin went up, her fasting insulin went up to 50. That is, and so this kind of touches on the lipotoxicity and that side of things, but
sure,
that is making her health worse. I don't care what, never in no case will gaining weight be healing for you unless you're underweight. If you're already obese, gaining weight is taking you in a less healthy direction, period.
100%. Yeah. And I want to get to some of the things that you and Maria have talked about over the years. I want to talk on protein sparing modified fasting. high protein diets, lipotoxicity. I want to get there. One thing I wanted to touch on here too, because you've been pretty open about this. You've discussed like your like Lyme disease, chronic
Yeah.
inflammation. And before we kind of go into like the diet and the energy side of things, like I was curious to see, and maybe for the listeners to maybe know and understand from you as well, like how did switching to carnivore like shift the symptoms? Like what protocol did you follow? Like did you go like low carb, then keto, then carnivore? I was just kind of curious to see like
Yeah.
what your experience was.
Yeah. So my journey, like 16 years ago, I started eating keto all the time, very low carb. Um, about, I'd say 9 years ago, I started having these symptoms, like the stiffness in my back, my low
Hmm.
back. I thought it was from this old football injury that I have. I have a damaged disc in my low back from football in high school. Thought maybe there's something acting up there. But over the years, it moved up my back, into my shoulders, into my neck. And there was this like constant soreness, pain, less mobility, over time. And it got to the point where I was just like, there's something wrong here. This isn't that old back injury. So I started getting all the tests done that I could and all this stuff. And at the time, the standard Western blot Lyme test that they run, if you go to a typical doctor, it said negative for Lyme. So, because all of my symptoms, it sounded like Lyme disease to me. Well, okay, it says negative. So I went another year after that, still getting worse. Finally got a functional doctor and said, here's all the tests I want to run. I just please run all these tests. What my understanding of biochemistry and nutrition and everything, I want to try to diagnose myself. And all the tests that we ran, everything was totally fine except for inflammation, CRP. It was like 50. I was like, whoa, okay, something. I got a lot of inflammation here. This is not good. And then I got there's an IGeneX and there's also a Galaxy Labs Lyme test.
Hmm.
That's tests all the bands, not just a few that the standard Western blot test, and it came back positive for Lyme. So, at this point, I'm like 6-7 years of Lyme disease, chronic pain and symptoms, and at that point, this is, gosh, I don't know if I'm getting the years right, but it's at least 6-7 years ago. I went full carnivore because I know some people you don't even probably know in this space. There's Charlene Anderson is somebody that I had followed a little bit who she doesn't talk about it a lot, but she had Lyme disease, and probably 22, 3, 4 years ago, she went carnivore for her Lyme disease, and it
Oh
helped her a
wow.
lot. She's been doing that ever since and thriving.
So did you like start off like low carb and then you kind of
Yep.
started to see maybe like a reduction in like the inflammation and the pain, and did you like slowly cut the carbs down to when you got to carnivore and you're like, wow, this actually works? Or
So what I did, when I was keto or low carb,
Mhm.
I was not a person who liked the full mashed potatoes made with cauliflower or all this. I was, I'm a very savory kind of person. I don't like sweets much. So I really was eating, pretty close, what today people would probably call like ketovore. I'd
Oh
maybe
yeah,
have a
yep.
little onion on my burger or a little sugar-free ketchup on my burger, and that's about it. So I wasn't eating a lot of plants at that time because that's just my preference. And so when I went to full carnivore, I just stripped off the rest of the plants I was eating, and I did see an improvement in my pain and inflammation at that time.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, glad to hear like things are feeling better for you. Here's where I wanted to switch over to like the fat versus protein debate, lipotoxicity concerns.
Yep.
So from what you're seeing with like your current clients right now, like in your experience, like when is more fat? And I know you were just giving an example of the young woman that was 130 pounds and then she gained weight on carnivore, but like maybe, and I know this can be again different from gender, male, female, to where someone's starting out, how overweight they are. But like when does like adding more fat become detrimental, I would
Yeah.
say, or move us in the wrong direction?
Yeah. So it depends on a lot of things.
Hmm.
And this is where it's a very individualized approach, right? Somebody like Dr. Baker, who works out like a monster and he's huge and got all this muscle mass, he needs a lot of fuel. he doesn't have a ton of fuel on his body. So he needs a lot of fuel in his diet, and protein is not a fuel. And so you need a certain amount of protein to maintain your muscle mass every day. There's constant protein, amino acid turnover in your body, whether it's building muscle, turning over cells through autophagy, which, the Nobel Prize, I always get a kick out of people who talk about autophagy when it comes to like fasting and stuff. And yeah, autophagy markers will increase, will go up. We can't measure autophagy. We just have markers. They'll go up when you extended fast. But the Nobel Prize winner for autophagy estimated that every 3 to 4 months, you turn over all your protein cells in your entire body through autophagy. So
interesting.
That's average, like somebody eating the standard American diet and doing zero fasting. So I don't know if we really.
What was the time frame on that again? So it just even if we're 3 to 4 months, we can turn over like all the cells in the body?
Protein cells through autophagy.
Oh,
Autophagy,
wow,
if somebody doesn't know, it's the process where the body takes cells that are older or aging and they break them apart into their parts, use amino acids to build up new cells from those parts. And it's kind of the reversing of aging within the body, if you will. But again, there was another recent study that looked at the brain, and I think it was 4 to 5 months. Your entire brain, every cell is turned over through autophagy. So
wow.
How are you still you?
Even with no fasting, though, correct? Even with no fasting, just standard.
No, that's just the average. And
so that's interesting then. So because I think we hear this word from a lot of influencers and people that talk about like fasting, intermittent fasting. So what you're saying here is like the body has a natural process of autophagy. You don't necessarily have to go on a fast or a prolonged fast or even do intermittent fasting to get into like an autophagy type of state. Your body will naturally get there. Can you maybe accelerate autophagy by going through a prolonged fast? I'm sure you can, correct?
You know what increases a lot of the autophagy markers just about as much as extended fast? Strength training. And you're building muscle instead of losing it with an extended fast. So I'll take strength training every time if I want to increase autophagy.
So here's another thing: strength training in a fasted state, or does it matter if you've like eaten and then you strength train?
Strength training in general doesn't have to be fasted. Strength training by itself will cause autophagy to increase at post training.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so
back to what we were saying. Sorry,
sure.
Right there. But getting enough amino acids to fuel that process is so important. Not just to fuel autophagy, to build muscle, but also to replace skin, hair, nails that you're constantly losing every day. It's all amino acids. You need this constant supply. So everybody should get a minimum amount of amino acids. So in a carnivore setting where you basically have little to no carbs, what's left? Fat, right? And so fat becomes a thing that you can vary, right? So if things aren't working for you, you vary the fat, right? That's all that's left to change. So if you lower the fat, you'll allow the body to burn more off your fat stores. I mean, that's why you have fat stores, right? Is when you don't have enough energy in the diet, carbs or fat, you have some fuel tank there to tap into. If you're losing too much weight, or if you're at maintenance and you want to maintain and fuel workouts and whatnot, raise the fat up it more so that you fuel those workouts. You have enough to maintain your weight. That's kind of the approach we take from a carnivore setting, or it doesn't have to be carnivore either. You can take that same concept and move it into keto, low carb space as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes all the sense in the world to me. And then now switching, let's talk about like fasting, protein sparing, modified fasting. So when I first heard this term, I'm not going to lie, it sounded like a lot, right? Protein sparing, modified fast. And I almost want to say like you and Maria kind of maybe made this term up or kind of coined it. Would that be accurate? Because I feel like I first heard it from you guys.
So literally 15 plus years ago, we used to do this with clients because we knew how well it worked. And we called it pure protein days. And I think that's a much better term because that describes it a lot better. It's a pure protein day.
Yeah.
But later on, we found the medical term, which is what, and if you look up papers and scientific studies, and it's called a protein sparing modified fast. And the reason it's called that is they they would do studies on extended fasting, people eating nothing, just drinking water for multiple days. And they saw how great it was for fat loss, right? Because you're not eating anything. But they also saw the muscle loss. So people losing lean mass when they do that. So they developed a protein sparing the protein on your body, protein sparing, modified fast. So they modify off water fast to spare your body's protein. That's where the term comes from the medical setting. And so we just started using that term. That was the medical term.
Yeah. So I had a couple questions here. So basically, if I'm doing, and I actually incorporate like a high protein day or a protein sparing modified fast about once a week. And usually I'll do it on a Sunday. So Saturday, I made up my own phrase. I have like an excess energy intake day. So on Saturday, that's typically when, that's just basically a fancy word for, if I want to eat a little bit more than I normally do, I do. If I want to eat things that I know I don't typically eat, I'll do them on a Saturday. Saturday's typically like my longer workout or my more intense workout. Yeah. And then that's the day I'll do like an excess energy intake day. Sunday is the day where I'll kind of let my body work through a lot of that energy I have basically accumulated in my body from the prior day and Saturday. So when you're doing like a protein sparing modified fast, is there like timing around it? Like intermittent fasting, meaning this, if I'm gonna do a high protein day, could I, if I wanted to, does this matter if I were to wake up, like, let's say have like a chicken breast and some low starch veggies for like a breakfast if I wanted to, and then have the same thing for a late lunch, and then dinner I could have like maybe a pork tenderloin, lean cut of meat, and then veggies? Or would it be better to almost treat it as like an intermittent fasting where it's like, as long as you're getting the protein in, does the timing around the protein matter in terms of like what we're trying to get out of that specific type of that process?
Yeah, so a couple things. The way we do them is number one, it's, treat it like you would a water fast. You're not going to do a water fast every day and keep doing it forever, right? You're going to use it occasionally as a tool. And that's how we use it. It's you do PSMF days. We'd say generally if you're trying to lose weight, do them 1 to maybe up to maybe 3 days a week, depending on, again, very individual. If you're 200 pounds overweight, you can probably do more of them. If you're 10 pounds from goal weight, maybe 1 a week if that. So it's a tool and you use it sparingly. If you're doing it frequently, yeah, we actually recommend the same, where you do an overfeeding day or a maintenance day, basically a day where you eat maintenance level or more calories just to keep the metabolism honest and all that kind of stuff from the low calorie days. Because protein sparing days are pretty low calorie. The way we design them is it's basically little to no carbohydrates, 20 to 30 grams of fat, and then your protein goal and protein. So it's really just a lot of lean protein with minimal fat.
Got it. And how do you and Maria, Craig, how do you guys calculate the protein needs for each individual person? Do you guys just go off like lean? I know there's a lot of doctors out there like Gabrielle Lyon saying that, you got to eat like a gram of protein per pound of body weight. Then there's people out there, you got to eat gram of protein per pound of lean body weight. Then there's like 0.5 grams. I was curious to see, and again, I know it's probably different from person to person, male to female. I was curious to see, how do you calculate out the actual protein goals when someone's doing like a protein sparing modified fast?
Yeah, we have a calculator on our website that's free that people can use.
Cool.
That one we used to be based on lean body mass, but it's so hard to get an accurate body fat percentage, and people will use like the impedance scales, which are not very accurate. And then their numbers would get all shifted off, for protein goals and all that. So we actually switched that not too long ago to go by height. And this metric, it basically does like 90 grams of protein for a 5 foot tall woman, and then add 5 grams of protein per inch above that. So if you're 5'4", you're adding 20 grams to 90, 110 grams is your protein goal.
Got it.
A man start at like 100 grams of protein at 5 foot, and then add 5 grams per inch above that. So me, I'm 5'6", that'd be like 130 grams of protein. That's sort of the goal or I would even call it more of a floor, like a minimum of protein to hit for the day. And that is a pretty good metric. I mean, it's not going to be perfect all the time. If you got a bodybuilder who's 5'6", but they're, huge muscle mass, they're going to need more than that. But, as far as sort of a floor for autophagy, for, just the size of the person, all that, that's a good starting point.
And a quick question now, is that just typical daily protein intake, or is that just the minimum amount or the floor, like you said, of protein an individual should have on a protein sparing modified fast day?
That's just in general.
Got it.
And protein sparing days, we typically, like in our calculator, we'll add a little more protein to it. So it's, let's say, for example, that example I gave you, 130 grams of protein for a 5'6" man. We'd probably go 140, 150 on a protein sparing day, just because it helps with satiety. Because again, it's a very low calorie day. Adding a little extra protein will help you with satiety that day, so you're not ravenous. But if you're at 130 and you're not hungry, you don't have to add extra that day. It's just, if you need it.
Got it. And again, the timing doesn't necessarily matter with something like this, right? As long as you're getting the grams per protein in throughout the day, that's the key, right?
Yeah. A couple things on that. Number one, we would say, generally speaking, probably, you could try to hit your protein goal every day. It would be ideal. The next best would be maybe averaging out to your protein goal over the course of the week. So, one day I'm, a little short. Tomorrow, maybe I'll add a little extra.
Yes.
That kind of thing. That's totally fine too. From an interday timing, I think it's important to get a good, complete protein meal with, complete amino acid profiles. So, like animal proteins, at least 30 grams in your first meal, and have that first meal be as early in the day as you can, personally. And this is from a, ideal standpoint of muscle protein synthesis and muscle building and all that kind of stuff. If you get that first meal, there's kind of once you hit that for the day, that sort of threshold of leucine, to get enough to start building muscle, it's sort of a halo. And now over the next maybe 20, 24 hours, your body's like, okay, we're building muscle today. So if that second meal is maybe not even 30 grams of protein, maybe it's only 20, your body's still going to say, we're building muscle today because that first meal had enough. And you get sort of a 24-hour halo on that. So if you get that first meal to have enough complete protein and move it earlier in the day, then you can have a little more leeway throughout the day.
Yeah, perfect. And I've got a couple more things on protein here, because I do want to talk to you about the sugar diet, believe it or not,
okay.
and your thoughts on that. But in terms of protein, now let's talk about like per meal. Because, again, going back to having conversations with Ted Naiman, he was saying like there's basically no limit on, basically a lot of that stuff is a myth. You hear about, hey, your body can only take in so much protein per meal. It's typically between 30 to 50 grams. If you're going over that, that protein goes into it. And I think I've heard Peter Attia, I saw him on a clip. I saw him talking about this too. It's like anything over 50 grams during a meal, like that protein is just basically going to put into like a gluconeogenesis type of state. I was curious on your thoughts on that in regards to, do you feel like there is a certain like protein not time frame, but like range we should be eating, or does that even really matter? Could I have 100 grams of protein in one sitting and feel good about it? Like, I was just curious there.
So yeah, generally speaking, there's people in the community that will promote things like OMAD, 1 meal a day, and I'm not a big fan of that. And mainly it's because, especially with women, they struggle to get enough protein in one meal, and that's the main reason for us for not doing that. But I think in general, if you get extra protein in a meal, the body's going to use all the protein you consume. It's going to use it all. It's going to use it for building nails, hair, all the things that it's going to do with the protein, build muscle. It's going to use extra for, if you have a need for glucose in the body, whether you've done a workout and you've depleted your glycogen, you need some more glucose and you're not eating enough carbohydrate to resupply that. Great. It'll take some of that protein and make glucose from it, gluconeogenesis. And that's fine, because your body needs glucose as well. And no matter how what you do, you always need a steady supply of glucose in the body. for, red blood cells don't have mitochondria, so they can only be fueled on glucose. There's other tissues like brain neurons and things that use glucose, and if you're not eating any glucose, like in a carnivore setting, you got to make it from protein. And I'd rather have it make it from the protein I eat than the protein off my body.
Yeah.
And so, but there's, Ted's right on this. There's like the amino acid pool. Your body will pool up and it'll start doing autophagy, and yet autophagy, mTOR, it will start muscle protein synthesis, and there is a sort of rest period with that. But here's the thing with protein: the body's smart, and it's gonna make sure it uses it all. Not only with the amino acid pool, where it kind of pulls up amino acids and gets ready, waits for the next mTOR cycle, but also it slows digestion. And, one of the things, GLP-1s, they're all the rave, right?
Yeah.
But guess what also stimulates, and what's one of the things that GLP-1s do? They slow digestion.
Did they? Yeah. I thought it was just more of like a hunger mitigation drug, but...
That's part of it, but they also slow digestion.
Interesting.
Because that's what GLP-1 in the body does, right? And guess what? Protein stimulates GLP-1. And so protein will stimulate it much shorter, an hour or two after a meal versus, the drugs that last longer. But it stimulates GLP-1, so it slows digestion, helps with satiety, and it slows digestion to make sure that you digest all that protein. So if you eat a big protein meal, you'll stimulate more GLP-1, slow digestion down a little more to make sure you have time to consume and use all that protein. So yeah, I don't think there's any upper limit really to protein.
Interesting. And so that, just out of curiosity, while you brought that up, so that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Like if someone's taking a GLP-1 and they're eating a high protein diet, really what that's going to do is it's going to just slow down the digestion of the food, and you can absorb more of the protein. That's what we want. That's not a bad thing. Yeah.
It's the GLP-1 that is stimulated from food is the natural process of your body to, satiety foods, high satiety foods. The drugs are obviously going to try to overstimulate that, and, there's all the potential issues there. But if you're taking a GLP-1, I would for sure prioritize protein even more, because those have been shown to lose, in an ideal setting of fat loss, you're going to want to try to push the muscle loss down to, under 10%, maybe as low as 6, 7, 8%. That's ideal.
Yeah.
With the GLP-1 drugs, it's been shown that they can be 50% or more of the weight loss is muscle. So you really want to prioritize protein and really want to strength train to try to preserve that muscle.
Yeah. So okay. So I got a question there. So let's say then we're eating a high protein diet, which is already pretty satiating, right? And then we're bringing in a GLP-1 that slows. Basically, it does mitigate hunger and appetite and the desire to eat. And then it also slows down digestion. Could you be running into a situation where if you're taking a GLP-1 that slows the digestion even more, could you be running into some like negative consequences there?
I mean, it's possible. It depends on the GLP-1 and the dose and all those kind of things, but at the end of the day, one of the problems with GLP-1s, and this is why, you see so much muscle loss, I think, is if you're in that state of I'm just not hungry at all, what's gonna whet your appetite to grab something to eat? A chicken breast? Why not? It's gonna be the potato chips or the cookies, or that's the only thing that's gonna entice you at that point. And so that, I think, ends up one of the reasons why people don't get as much protein, and then they lose more lean mass in those states.
That makes sense. So for the people out there that are doing the GLP-1s, like no matter what, just bump up that protein, get as much protein as you possibly can, mitigate any drop in muscle.
And strength train, or even Dr. Lehman, I when I talked with him, he mentioned some of the studies they did. It doesn't have to be like, when you say strength training, you're picturing like in the gym with all these weights, and that is great. But even in one of his studies, they looked at just like yoga and stretching. And that did pretty well. That got them to like 10% lean mass loss. So, any kind of activity that you can do can be helpful like that.
Oh, dude, I'm a huge fan of yoga. Like, I mean, if you look at my Instagram page, yes, it's just like me working out. I like to lift. I like to run. I do kettlebell work, pull-ups, push-ups, dips, like all that type of stuff. But man, a yoga class will humble you. And you will go in there. I remember my first yoga class. When I walked in there, I saw all these 60, 70-year-old ladies, and they were holding like a side plank on one arm. And I was just like, okay, like I could do this. No, I couldn't. Like, and
Yeah.
it was all like body weight and holding poses. And no, man. And so like, it kind of sold me on like yoga, like, okay, like I need to be doing this, like to be able
Yeah.
to maneuver your body weight and hold those types of positions. Like, to be honest with you, that is a form of strength training and it's a
Oh,
great one.
absolutely. And different muscles and balance. And,
Oh yeah.
one of the things my wife loves to do is body pump. I don't know if you're familiar with those classes. They used to have them at the Y. She does them on her own now.
Mm-hmm.
And I would do those with her. And those are humbling too, because it's weights, but you'll do like, they have somebody up in the front, that you follow, sort of like yoga, but and you'll do like a bench press type thing, but you'll
Mm-hmm.
do it for like 8 minutes straight. And so you put a lighter weight on, but you're doing different ones halfway up, down, all the way up, down, and you're doing this for like 8 straight minutes, and it's like, oh my God, my arms are burning. And yeah, I mean, it's a different exercise, but yeah, it's great.
Yeah, that's the maybe the main message to send people, like try new things. Like,
Yeah,
your body adapts to, if you're a runner, your body will adapt. If you're a bodybuilder, your body's going to adapt to that routine. If you're a strength trainer, or you're a weightlifter and you're doing like clean and jerk and snatch all the time, your body's going to adapt to those movement patterns. Try a movement pattern that your body's not used to. It will humble you.
a really cool one that I just recently read from a study. They looked at the difference between a 1 hour walk. So at lunchtime, say somebody sits all day at the computer, at lunchtime they go on a pretty vigorous 1 hour walk, or maybe it was 30 minutes, but it was a pretty extensive walk. And then they compared that to, instead of doing nothing at lunchtime, but every hour, just stand up and do 10 bodyweight squats. That's it. And the bodyweight squats were better for body composition and everything than the 30 or 45-minute walk, whatever it was, at lunch.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's another interesting way to, like, every hour, to stand up 10 bodyweight squats. Anybody can do that.
Oh yeah.
Anytime.
Oh, I do that. I do that stuff all the time. Like this one before I jumped on this podcast, 30 push-ups, and like even when I'm having meetings throughout the day, I'll do 30 push-ups, 30 air squats. And like
Yeah.
it gets the blood, especially, and I've got a standing desk. I'm standing here sometimes for work. Like I'll sit down, and then for podcasts and other meetings, like I'll bring the desk up just so I can like move around and be stiff. But I was just talking to my wife about this because, with her job, she was recently promoted, so she doesn't have as much time as she wants to find a workout. And I just told her, I was like, hey, every like 30 minutes or every hour and a half, like put like a reminder on your phone and just do 20 walking lunges down to the end of the hall and back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And just do that 5 times a day, 20, boom, you'll knock out 100 lunges. And
Yeah.
that shows to be just as beneficial as spending, like 30 minutes doing like a leg workout.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's great that it's so approachable that anybody can do it. That's what I love about it.
I tell they're like micro workouts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Love it.
Very cool. Okay, so I wanted to talk about the sugar diet because I feel like, and I've got my 2 cents on this, and I think some people are seeing it work. I think some people are seeing it not work, but I've got some hesitations, concerns, long-term like ramification. Like I think, to be honest, I think in this situation, I feel like we're, stepping over dollar bills to pick up nickels and dimes in the long run with the sugar diet. But I want to talk about this with you real quick and just get your insights here, because I am a big fan of the Bell brothers and Mark Bell. I know you and Maria are too. You guys know the Bell brothers very, very well. And the one thing I will say about Mark, and one of the reasons why I kind of love that guy and respect him, is like he's willing to try just about everything. You know what I mean? He did the war on carbs years ago. He was on Joe Rogan talking about the war on carbs. And then, but he'll do these experiments, and I do respect him not being like religious and stuck with any one diet. He's willing to go out and test and try some things around. The one issue that I've got, and the hesitation I've got, is like, people that are already like pre-diabetic and overweight, like, is this really the right route to go down, like right out of the gate? And this is kind of what I want to talk to you about, because we are seeing it work. We are seeing the sugar diet work. And maybe to break down the sugar diet for the listeners, just so they have a good understanding. And Craig, come in here, correct me if I'm wrong here. But the sugar diet, when we're doing a sugar diet, what we're doing is we are dropping the carbohydrates, the starchy ones, we're dropping the protein, we're dropping the fat, and then we're increasing basically like the simple sugars. And the foods that potentially you can eat on the sugar diet would be like candy, like table sugar, syrups, fruit, and basically like low starch vegetables and fruit. Is that an accurate assessment from what you understand about it?
I believe so, yeah, and generally it's a little low. It's lower protein too.
Yeah, low protein.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And so basically what I think's going on here, and I think you're going to be the guy to ask about this with like the engineering background. I think what the people that do see results on it, basically what they're doing is they're manipulating their metabolism in such a way to where like they're putting their metabolism in overdrive. Yes, they can burn some fat, but what I'm worried about and what I think people should understand is the accumulation of sugars that we're eating can potentially have detrimental impacts down the line on our system and how we in disease like cancer, like all these other types of things that we know sugar can induce. Just what are your thoughts on the sugar diet, and maybe give your insights there? I'd love to know.
I can share with you a chart that you can overlay with this if you want, or I could probably pull up my phone. I don't know if I have it on my phone anymore. My biggest problems with the sugar diet are twofold. Number one, going low protein, I think, is never a good idea long term. You know, muscle loss is something that you're not going to see it in a week. You're not going to see it in a month, maybe not even 6 months, but a year, 2 years down the road of eating low protein, you're going to start noticing a loss of muscle. And that's not good. Nobody wants that. Nobody especially anybody over like 50, does not want to lose any muscle. It's so hard to maintain muscle as you get older that any muscle loss is something to really be concerned about. That's one part of it. My other part that is my biggest concern is Maria and I, from the beginning of all of this, we've always focused on a whole foods approach and always looking at what's the most nutrient dense foods I can eat. Because, at the end of the day, I think for so many reasons, from the environment to, the population to just health, if we could get all the vitamins and minerals my body needs, all the amino acids my body needs, and do it in the fewest amount of calories, but get everything my body needs, that's probably good for everybody and everything, right?
A high protein, whole foods based approach.
Exactly. And that's what gets you that. Because if you look at, in this book, I dedicated a whole chapter. We wrote this book 10 years ago now. I think we were actually writing the book, right? And at that time, it wasn't widely understood, and you didn't see it all the time online of what was the most nutrient dense food in that you can eat. And so I made all these charts with like a steak versus broccoli versus blueberries, all these superfoods, right? That we're always told these are superfoods. Well, I lined them up with like 13 of the most essential vitamins and minerals, and just a steak blows them out of the water. There's so many more vitamins and minerals in just a steak than any of those other foods. And so one of the most nutrient dense foods you can eat is animal proteins. And things like organ meats or liver are just off the charts. It's probably the most nutrient dense food on the planet. But when you focus on those foods, you're getting the amino acids and all the vitamins and minerals your body needs. That's why I think prioritizing protein for health, not only short-term health, but long-term health, is always essential for anyone. And that's probably my biggest problem with the sugar diet is that you look at the in that chart I can send you.
Sure.
I compared,
we can share it in the show notes too.
Yeah, one of the influencers, I took his diet for the day. Everything he described eating, put it in the chronometer, looked at all the vitamins and minerals, put it in a chart compared to, what I eat in a typical day, same calories, and it's not even close. I mean, there's hardly any vitamins and minerals in the sugar diet compared to this.
Oh God, and I agree with you. Here's another question then for you. Why do you think some people are seeing success with it though?
Yeah, so a couple things on that. Two of the people kind of in the forefront on this, like Mark, they're open about taking testosterone. And if you're taking steroids, you can eat damn near anything you want, and you're going to be in growth mode. And so it doesn't really matter
That's
from a,
that's
from
a
a
good
nutrient
point.
breakdown standpoint.
Yeah.
Uh, Secondary to that, you know, at the end of the day, we talked about this earlier. Protein isn't really a fuel. It doesn't want to be used as a fuel. So you got fat and carbohydrates as your two fuel sources. Well, they're just what we typically do is we ramp down the carbohydrates and then adjust the fat based on the goals. They're ramping down the fat to almost zero, and then using more carbohydrates. Well, either one will work. Just like vegans that eat little to no fat, they'll lose a lot of weight, right? They're eating a lot of carbs. They
Yeah.
eat a lot of fruit and whatnot, but they're not eating any fat. So, and you're probably familiar with the Randall cycle. It's this the body prioritizes fuels, and it prioritizes carbohydrates over fats. And so if you're eating high carb and high fat, that fat's going to get stored while it burns the carbs. If you lower the carbohydrates, more fat gets oxidized in the body. It just kind of it prioritizes carbs over fat. So when you lower the carbs, more fat gets oxidized. Well, if you don't eat any fat, it doesn't really matter because you can't store fat you didn't eat, right? And carbohydrates, in great excess, they will get turned into fat. If you run out of storage and you got too much carbohydrates, some of it can be turned to fat. But everybody, somebody's 100 pounds overweight, the vast majority of that fat was from fat in the diet. It's just the high fat and the high carb. The high carb was being burned, all that fat was being stored. And so, it can work. I don't think it's healthy, really short term or long term, in my opinion.
Yeah, and also too, it's like the people that should be, because again, going back to what you were saying about Mark, like he's already lean. Yes. Well, yes, there is the anabolic steroid component to it, but he was already decently lean. He's doing this in the name of being more jacked, more tan, as he would probably say. But he's already decently lean. He's basically losing the last maybe 10 to 20 pounds of like stubborn body fat that, and he's got specific goals. But what about on the flip side of someone that's maybe like pre-diabetic, they're obese and they're going the sugar diet route? Like there is no way, and maybe system-wise, this is where I can get your insights. There's probably no reason that person should be doing a diet like that, correct?
Yeah, so two things on that. If Mark was doing blood markers all this time, that would be very enlightening. Triglycerides, A1C, fasting glucose, fasting, these different components. Jenny Mittich did a sugar diet, and she did labs, and she showed how hers got a lot worse in a lot of categories, and she gained weight. So it didn't work well for her. But what you're talking about, so here's the thing, and this we can kind of come all the way back to the lipotoxicity discussion.
Sure.
So a lot of this comes back to kind of the root cause of insulin resistance. And insulin resistance, metabolic dysfunction in the body, a large amount of it originates in the adipocytes, in your fat cells. And what happens is everybody, I learned this a long time ago, and now I'm preaching about it almost daily. Like when I was a teenager, I heard this interesting thing where, when you're a toddler, you make lots of new fat cells typically, and then you get to an age where you just stop making new fat cells and you just fill up and empty the ones you have. Okay. That was something I learned when I was a teenager. And now I really understand what it means. And what it means from a metabolic standpoint is you can have a certain number of fat cells. And if you don't have a lot of them genetically, or, a lot of Asian people don't have a lot of fat cells. And so they get insulin resistance quicker without gaining a lot of body fat. And the reason is because those fat cells are like balloons, and you can only stuff them so full. And at some point, they're going to burst so they stop accepting fat, or they reject insulin. So those fat cells will reject insulin and say, I can't store any more fat. I'm full. And the problem is if you get a lot of the fat cells on your body doing this, what's happening now? The fat you eat is going into the bloodstream. The pancreas it tightly controls fuel in the bloodstream. And if there's a lot of fat in that bloodstream, high triglycerides, it doesn't like that. So it tries to drive it into storage. But guess what? The fat cells aren't taking it. They're rejecting insulin. I'm full. So now the fasting insulin goes up even more and even more because it's trying to drive this fat out of the bloodstream. It's kind of panicking because the fat cells aren't taking it. Well, now the fat's going to accumulate, in the liver, in the pancreas, around the organs. You got fatty liver. You got high triglycerides all the time. You got high fasting insulin. You're insulin resistant. It all starts with the fat cells being too full. And this can happen we've had clients that are 110 pounds and they're insulin resistant because they have so few fat cells genetically. They fill up so fast, they become insulin resistant almost right away. On the contrary, we've had people 300 pounds overweight and their blood markers look pretty normal because genetically they either have a lot of fat cells or there's a few the vast majority of people, you only have so many and you fill or empty them. There's a few people that can keep making new fat cells later in life. And one of them, we can also put it in the notes, but
Sure.
Tyler, he was 645 pounds. And he came to us for help, and we helped him pro bono because he actually went to high school with my wife's brother. And he lost like 150 pounds, like no time. But what was interesting, when he was 650 pounds, I sent a blood marker panel to him. It tested his triglycerides, his A1C, his fasting glucose, his fasting insulin, and a couple other things. He, at 650 pounds, his fasting glucose was a little low on this test for some reason. It was like 60, I think. Normally it's like 80, 90 fasting glucose. His fasting insulin, I think, was like 4. His A1C was like 5.6 or 5.7. His blood markers is, if you do the HOMA IR where you take fasting glucose and fasting insulin, it was like 2. It was like totally insulin sensitive range. And he's 650 pounds, and so what he's one of the genetic variants that could keep creating new fat cells. And if you keep creating new fat cells and keep them small, you'll never get insulin resistant. And that's kind of shows the power of the fat cells in this whole process. And so back to the original discussion, lipotoxicity. So, and to the sugar diet. So back to the sugar diet, if you're not eating, so at the end of the day, no matter what you eat, if you shrink your fat cells, lose body fat, your insulin will come down, your fasting insulin will come down, your insulin resistance will go down. So you could improve your insulin resistance if you shrink your fat cells, lose body fat, even eating the sugar diet. Now, again, is that the healthiest way to do it? Not by far.
Yeah.
But the other end of the spectrum, eating high-fat carnivore, when you're already at your fat threshold, the fat cells are like, I'm not taking it anymore. You can make insulin resistant worse by eating too much fat. And we see it all the time. I've got slides in my presentation. I'm going to be presenting in San Diego at the conference there. And I've got a bunch of these testimonies from people that followed that advice, gained additional weight, and everything got worse. Triglycerides shot up, fasting glucose shot up, eating zero carb, insulin shot up. It's because the metabolic dysfunction that's originating in those fat cells.
And it's funny, like, I feel like now I'm talking about Ted Naiman's approach or Gabrielle Lyon now on basically like every podcast. But like going back to Ted, it's like it really comes down to a protein to energy type of ratio, right? Like what energy are we bringing into the body? How much energy, how much stored energy do we have on our body? How much energy are we bringing into the body? What's the activity look like? But like the kicker is protein, I would say. And then what energy, like keeping the protein high, that's going to help satiate us. But the energy that comes along with that protein, whether it's on a ribeye or whether it's a stick of butter or whether it's, a loaf of bread or whatever, that kind of matters. That kind of matters.
Yeah. I mean, that's the engineer in Ted and the engineer in me that look at the biochemistry standpoint of this, that protein isn't really used as a fuel unless it's basically a fuel of last resort. And that's another thing we can touch on real quick here is that people talk about, what about rabbit starvation if you're doing protein sparing modified fast? Because you're eating very little carbs or fat, right? And it's just lean protein. Rabbit starvation only occurs if you're very lean, so you have very little fat on your body, and the diet you're eating is very lean all the time, right? And so now your body's struggling for fuel. And what's it going to do? It's going to have to turn protein into fuel, and that's very energy intensive, and your body doesn't like doing that a lot. and that's when a problem occurs, right?
Yeah.
If you have stored fat, extra 20 pounds on you to lose, there's zero issue whatsoever with rapid starvation. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's for me, it's fuels, carbs and fat, and protein. And protein always should be prioritized because of the amino acids, because of the vitamins and minerals, how it satiates you, all of those things. And then either fuel, but for me, if I up the carb side of the thing, like the sugar diet, I'm going to be eating I'm basically back to kind of what I was doing before I ate this way. And I had that afternoon slump where I want to take a nap, and I've got this roller coaster of hunger every 2 hours. That's you can eat 1,000-calorie blizzard, and 1,000 calories, boom, your blood sugar spikes through the roof, and then it crashes. And guess what happens when your blood sugar is crashing and going too low? You're hungry again.
Yeah.
And so now you're eating again, and 2 hours later, even though you just ate 1,000-calorie flurry, right? Eat 1,000-calorie eggs and tell me the next time you eat.
Yeah.
Probably
you're not going to be eating for a while. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's kind of the way I look at it.
100%. I couldn't agree with you more. And yeah, I mean, if we're just talking about like that's why I think Ted wrote his second book, Satiety per Calorie, right? Like if you're just looking at like, you can eat 10 Oreos, an egg and an Oreo basically have roughly the same amount of calories, but you can eat a whole entire box of Oreos. I would bet you couldn't put down more than like 5 or 6 hard-boiled eggs before you wanted to throw up or just stop eating altogether.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we're coming up on here on time, Craig. And by the way, this has been fantastic. I think you've dropped a lot of really good nuggets here. I wanted to, before I kind of get into like what you and Maria are doing next, like what's coming down the pipeline for you, like how people can work with you. Just out of curiosity, what does your day-to-day look like now? Like, can you walk us through like a day of like eating and working out for us, and what maybe your training and workout looks like too?
Yeah, I've been really blessed to have gotten a lot of my inflammation under control, not just with diet, but last year I got a hip replacement. One of the things is the Lyme disease has led to ankylosing spondylitis, autoimmune disorder for me, which is like arthritis of the joints that a lot of times is the hips, back, neck, sometimes shoulders. But the hip that I replaced was my biggest problem by far, and now I feel amazing. I mean, I take my pup for a long walk every morning, and then in the afternoons I do some weightlifting. We got a nice gym over here we built.
Cool.
Do as much weightlifting as I'm able to. But my diet is, I'm kind of like a dog. I can eat the same thing every day, and it just works. And I usually have some combination of eggs in the morning, whether it's eggs and chorizo or eggs and bacon or something like that. And then the afternoon, I usually have a couple of hamburger patties, cheese, maybe. I've gotten to the point now where I can add, I think, especially with the hip replacement, I can add maybe some caramelized onions, cooked in butter or something like that to those, and some cheese. And that's, those are pretty much it. I'm pretty, I usually have 2 meals. Sometimes in the evening, I'll have a little snack, maybe some pork rinds or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's about it for food. I'm still not nearly as active as I'd like to be because of all of this, but I'm definitely in a better place than I was.
Very cool. Yeah, it's fun. It's funny going back to eating the same thing. I mean, when you think about it, though, it's like typically, we get to this. A lot of people talk about like carnivore or keto or all of these diets in general, low carb. They're not really sustainable, and there's not enough variety. And it's like, really, when you're talking to people, it's like, well, think about really all the different types of things that you're eating. Like, if you really were to break it down, you really don't have that much variety in your diet, right? Yeah. Like, and I eat the same thing every day too. It's typically like chicken breasts and like hamburger patties, roasted carrots. I'm a big fan of Greek yogurt. I make an awesome, like for basically a dessert every night. I'll have dinner and then I'll make like a Greek yogurt protein bomb. I'll 2 servings of Greek yogurt, protein, collagen, throw some cinnamon in there, maybe some blueberries and peanut butter, whatever the case is. It's 70 grams of protein in that bowl, and it tastes like better to me than ice cream does. So it's like literally.
Yeah, we actually planted some strawberries here, so every night, a lot of times it's my snack is I'll have a few berries, a little bit of cream on it. That's awesome. Can't beat it.
Yeah, can't beat it. Yeah, so the simplest things tend to be the most effective.
Totally.
That's what I found. Well, perfect. I know we're kind of up here against the clock. What projects are you and Maria working on? Or you specifically? Any new books, speaking engagements? Like what's coming down the pipeline?
I actually got a couple things coming up here. Less than 30 days away now, the San Diego conference. It used to be Low Carb San Diego. I think it's a metabolic. I can't remember the full name, but we have, if you go to ketomaria.com, you can get to all of our events and things we're doing. That's in San Diego in August. And then September, I'm going to be in Tennessee at Low Carb for Better Health. I'll be speaking there. And then Maria and I have this crazy trip we're doing. We had planned to go to Africa. I'm big into photography. You'll see on my Instagram page, I do a lot of photography. We're going back to Africa for a photo safari. And we got a call from Dr. Noakes. You know Dr. Noakes down in...
Tim Noakes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's got a conference in Cape Town. He said, I'd love for you guys to come speak. And it lined right up with this trip we already had planned. So
that's awesome.
We did a couple days, and we're going to Cape Town for that. And then we got a call from Low Carb Cairo about speaking there. So on the beginning of the trip, we're going to speak in Cairo, then do the safari, then do Cape Town, and then come back. So it's this whole whirlwind trip. But
oh my God, how amazing and how awesome that sounds.
How it all lined up. We're going to be North Africa all the way down to Cape Town. It's going to be quite the trip.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you guys, I mean, that sounds incredible. Hopefully you guys have a blast, and it's going to be kind of like work and fun at the same time, but totally. Probably a lot of exploring too. That's awesome. Hopefully you guys have a blast.
A little bit on the down low, but we're actually writing a new book. This book is almost from when we wrote it, almost 10 years old, keto, but I think it's really solid still. We talked about personal fat threshold in there. But we kind of touched on it. Mm-hmm. I know so much more now about it that we're writing our own general health book. It's a nutrition guide kind of book to kind of supersede, both of these and add tons more information. So that's probably 6 to 9 months out, but
got it.
Marie and I are both working on that right now.
New book coming out. That's awesome. Well, Craig, this was absolutely fantastic. And again, I want to be respectful of your time. So where can people go to find you, Maria, the books? Like, I know you dropped the Keto Maria website. Where can people find you and all that good stuff?
That's the best spot, because what I did on that, it's ketomaria.com, and I put links to all of our websites, all of our information. At the bottom, there's links to all of our social media, so you can find all of our accounts right there.
Awesome. Well, this was fantastic. Thanks, guys, for listening to the Low Carb Consultant Podcast. We'll catch you guys on the next one.